We're rolling. Timer starts now. Mark. Hi, I'm Ford.
And I'm Sky. And these are not our real names. These are our superhero names, and with our powers combined, we formed the writing partnership L. Skyford. Welcome to Booklandia.
Today, we're going to review a book, most likely a romance. But before we get much further, did you know you can watch our faces do this episode by subscribing to us on Twitch at L. Skyford or YouTube at L.Skyford? You should really do it. We give good face.
And sometimes there's a dog bomb at Ford's house.
This is true. For our other socials, you can follow us on Twitter at SkyfordL, on Instagram at L.Skyford. And if you're interested in our book, blog, or even more book reviews, head over to our website, lskyford.com.
Lastly, this and every episode are chock full of oversharing and spoilers, and every episode is rated E for explicit. You have been warned.
Hello!
Hi. Hi,
There's
everyone.
people in our world.
There's people in our room. We made a bigger room. Well, hi, everyone. Today we're talking about Bridget Jones's Diary by Helen Fielding. But first, let's talk about our guests for today's episode. Hi, guests. Wait, this direction? I'm terrible at directions on cameras. Hi, guests.
Hello!
All right. We have invited the Peony podcast to join us today to chat about this book. And then we're going to go over to the Peony to talk about Bridget Jones' Diary, the movie. So do both sides. Watch and listen to both bits, because chances are we're going to say things like, we'll talk about this on the other side. I plan to do that a lot. So before we get too far into it, I would love for you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the Peony.
Yeah. My name's Lex. I am one half of the Peony. I'll toss it over to you.
Hi, I'm Jules. I'm the other half of the Peony, and I just had a very long sigh. I'm happy you have like the explicit warning in your intro, because I drop a lot of fucks. A lot. It's like if you were to play a drinking game listening to the Peony, which is an arts and culture podcast where we talk about a plethora of topics, and we also interview guests, creatives specifically, where we ask them the question, what happened when you stopped living for other people's expectations and started living in your own joy? How did that change your life? And so broad topics, amazing guests, but a lot of fucks dropped. So if you want to make a drinking game out of it, I think legally I'm supposed to tell you shouldn't, because that could be dangerous. There are a lot of F-bombs.
You must be 21 or over to play, depending on where you live, or 18. You know what? Whatever the rules are where you are.
Use your rules. Use your own rules.
Cheers.
Be responsible.
Yeah.
How about that? That's what we're going to say.
Yep.
Yeah. So, should everyone just take a moment, pause this episode, fill up the bevy, and come back? Just to,
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent.
Fuck yeah.
Excellent.
There it is.
And there we go. That's the first one. All right.
Ayo, ayo.
Excellent. All right. So since you guys are guests, I'm gonna explain to you how the next bit works in a second. First, how are you, Ford? I haven't seen you yet. I haven't asked you how you're doing. How are you doing?
Oh, it's fine. One of
It's
my
fine.
dogs murdered a baby animal, a baby possum. Yep. And then she got fleas from it. And so last night we were up super late dealing with fleas. So I'm very tired.
You had dead possum curse.
Dead possum curse.
Oh.
Poor, like, tiny dead baby things are the saddest in the world. And
Yes.
R.I.P. little possum.
So sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
a bunch.
How
But
does
otherwise,
revenge?
I'm so excited to be here though. So like, I had a headache up until this very moment. I'm like, oh no, now we're gonna have fun.
Endorphins are the greatest. I mean, also, you know, I'm not a doctor, but endorphins are the greatest.
I've heard through science that endorphins are great.
Yes. All right.
How about you? How are you doing?
I was gonna say I have a bad allergy day, but like literally every day is bad allergy day. So I sound like a little bit like Nina Simone, which honestly cannot be bad. But but it's like super scratchy up in here, and I was like, did I smoke a pack of smokes yesterday and not know it? Because that's what it feels like. So I'm a little sex operatory today, but could be beneficial.
I was about to say, have you seduced your spouse yet? Because that feels like a good time.
I mean, not
TMI, okay.
not to cheapen our relationship, but I don't need Nina Simone to make that happen.
Cool.
I mean, there would not be a complaint about Nina Simone, but still.
Amazing.
All right. So the game that we play next is we try to catch up our listeners and viewers to the plot of the book that we're talking about in case they've joined us and they have never heard or read the book that we're talking about. Very unlikely with Bridget Jones, but you never know. So one of us writes this, what we think is a 30-second copy to explain what is happening in the book. And then we put up a timer and try to read through that copy in the given time. That's the game. Get through what's written in 30 seconds and maybe make it legible. Because sometimes when I read through them, they're like super dense and you have no idea what I'm saying.
And spelling errors.
Yay. Oh yeah. Also, I mean, I tried, but again, yes, there sometimes I trip myself up by being like, no, that's not how that word. That is not a word.
Same.
So, would you guys like to? Would one of you like to read what is in our script?
Woo.
It is called the roll timer. And if you've not read this paragraph, it's even better. That's really the golden opportunity right there.
I'm super
a cold read.
A cold read is really the best here. Okay, so I'm gonna count you in.
I vote Lex.
I'll do it.
Yeah,
excellent.
She has that voiceover smoothness.
Fabulous. All right, I am gonna count you in. I'm gonna say 3, 2, 1, and then a timer will appear on the screen, and a sound of a timer should also be heard. All right. 3, 2, 1.
Bridget is a 30-something singleton in London, looking to no longer be alone in the era of self-help books, Vogue advice columns, and fad diets. Her career has stalled, her love life hasn't really started, and she keeps getting invited to dinner parties with smug marrieds. Now Bridge is changing her ways, looking for Mr. Right, and trying to quit smoking.
Ooh.
Oh, nice!
Yeah, plenty of
10
time.
seconds left. Boom, boom.
Plenty of time left. I should have included more in this paragraph.
It was perfect.
Yeah, that's what Bridget Jones is about. All right, here is the cover of Bridget Jones. I feel like the American release and maybe the UK release, because then it got re-released with the movie cover. So this is what it is. It is, for those of you listening and not looking, this cover is an open white notebook, and there's green eyes and mouth open in an O that dominate the screen. I find this cover really creepy. Like I think that I should be reading true crime, and I'm not. I'm reading rom-com or similar,
or like Tales from a Sex Worker, because that is also a blowjob mouth. If I've ever seen one.
True. Yeah. So once the book became really popular and they decided to make a movie out of it, they immediately re-released it with the movie cover. And for that's the one that we're reading from is the one with the movie cover with the stars. And we sort of will. I want to get a little bit into all of the stars that are in the movie in a second. Okay,
that's for the next episode.
I know. There we go. This is the first time I'm gonna say go listen to the Peony episode, because we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah.
Take a drink. So this book first came out in 1996, but a wider release in 1999. So we're now clocking in 20 plus years old for BJD. Bridget Jones Dick.
Bridget Jones's Dickory.
Yeah.
What?
So when did y'all
Yeah.
first read this book? Sorry, I'm already off the rails on this
No,
script.
that's we're always off the rails. This was actually my first read through of it. Was for this. I've seen the film maybe 30 times, but this was my first time reading the book, which was an adventure. So
Yeah. I have found in doing this reread, so this was a reread for me, and I think I read it around when the movie came out. How vastly different the two are. The book to the movie.
Yeah. I had to keep reminding myself that this is a book and that the film is like I kept trying to shoehorn in the expectations of the book or of the film into the book, and I at a certain point I was like, you got to let that go. Like that's a completely different medium. It's almost like not a completely different story, but there is a lot of differences, which I was kind of surprised about, but well, we can get into that later. So yeah.
This was a reread for me as well. And there's been 20 years between the two reads, because I also read it in anticipation of the movie being released. And I found myself in identifying with completely different characters. And I remember when I first read it being like I really connected to Bridget a lot. And now I've really connected to Sharon a lot. And I really wanted to yell at Bridget a lot.
Yeah.
Shazzer I was like, yes. And like Susan Faluti's backlash and all of the things that she brings up. I'm just like, yes, please and thank you. Listen to your friend. Leave the toxic cycles. Listen to your friend. So yeah, that was a fascinating growth arc, I guess, for me as a person, because I was like, oh, this is where I'm at now emotionally and where I was before.
Now, you told me, Sky, a very interesting fact about this book. It does relate to the movie, but I feel like it's worthwhile to bring up. Would you like to share with the team, with the squad?
Well, so there's two parts of it, or there are two facts that I really like about this, and truly they're factoids. But the first one is that Helen Fielding was asked to write a how to be single in your mid-30s column for a British news magazine. I don't remember which one anymore. And so she was going to do it. And then she realized that what she wanted to say didn't align with how she felt herself. And so she decided to create this character of Bridget and tell it from the standpoint of a much messier person with different standards and morals than Helen Fielding herself. But as a caricature and as a piece of satire. And then all of these people were like, oh, Helen Fielding is Bridget Jones. And she was like, no. Bridget Jones is a character I invented to make fun of what's happening. Helen Fielding does not believe in these things. She just thought to point it out to all of you that it's ridiculous. And so she literally had to write an article that was called Helen Fielding is not Bridget Jones, explaining how the two are not the same. So that to me is a little crazy, with like in a this is how society takes things out of context way. And then the other part of it is Helen Fielding is IRL friends with Hugh Grant and Colin Firth. And when she was originally writing this book, she intentionally thought of the two men as the men that would be the thought behind the character. And then when the movie was signed, she was like, well, these are the two people that I think should play them because I literally wrote it for them. And then they were like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea. I think the producing team is the same that did Notting Hill. So Hugh Grant had already established a relationship with that producing company and with the romantic comedy genre. Like we all thought of him as the romantic lead. And so for him to play Daniel Cleaver, ultimately not a romantic lead, was like a departure, a nice departure. I don't know. Film stuff is weird, but I do think it's funny that she meant for those two people. She did not have a Bridget in mind. She Renee Zellweger was a casting choice, but she did have the two men in mind, and so that I think is pretty interesting.
When we go over to the Peony, I want to talk about Hugh Grant. So just I'm putting a pin in the
and then we'll see you at the Peony with Hugh Grant.
I also want to talk about Colin Firth's. I found that photo that Bridget describes where she sees him like heinous. I found it and I sent it to Julia and I was like, we're absolutely talking about this on the Peony. It's a journey. Yes. But yeah, when she describes like the photo of Colin Firth and Jennifer
Yule.
Yeah. Like in the magazine promoting Pride and Prejudice. I was like, this has to be real, right? It is. It's a lot. You can find it. We'll share it at the Peony as well.
Very nice.
Julia, I realized we didn't get your history of reading the book.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no. We lost your audio. Uh-oh.
Just try refreshing? Yeah?
Yeah, try refreshing. That might reconnect.
Oh, yeah. If you changed audio sources, refreshing.
Hey-oh.
Oh,
Is
hey,
she
there
back?
you are. You
Yes,
are. Yes.
yeah.
I'm sorry. This is going to be a technological nightmare. I'm just a fucking granny. So I went to my local public library. Shout out, support your local public libraries. I got that version of the book. Am I pointing to the right side? Yes, that version of the book.
Yes.
And I don't know if there are any Doctor Who fans out there, but it reminded me of like very early on that woman that's literally just a stretched skin with a face.
Yes!
Like that's what it was like.
Cassandra.
I was like, this is uncomfortable.
Cassandra.
Moisturize me.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
It was my first time reading the book, and it triggered every single horrible, misguided, hot mess internal conversation I had ever had in my early 20s living in New York City. And I had to put it down at multiple points and be like, oh, fuck, I can't go back to this place. Like, I can't. And like, there were some times where I just was not rooting for her. I was like, listen, you're taking this a little too far. But I had seen the film first before reading the book. And so I think, Lex, I had something very similar where I was like trying to come at it with a neutral perspective, but I still kept getting this like endearing, bubbly, loving, like Renee Zellweger in my mind. And that's what I think got me through the end of the book, is because I was like, I imagined her as this endearing person. Whereas just the book straight up, I was like, this woman is a heathen. She needs like help beyond her friend circle. I want to be there for her. I want to support her. Yeah. But like, she needs to get some shit together.
Yeah. Well, that was something I think this might be sort of slipping into one of the questions that we have, of because it's told only from her perspective, we know her thoughts, which there were moments where I was like, girl, keep that to yourself. And I was like, oh, this is herself. This is her journal. So then when I let go of that thought because at one point I was like, I don't know if Bridget's really likable. And I was like, but at the same time, she's also writing about thoughts and is being very honest. I think things we all think, but she's putting it down on paper, something that's private. But hearing her talk about her friends, and sometimes when she's like, oh, I prefer Tom when he's single and miserable because then he's more open to my issues. I was like, oh, girl. But I think it is like, it's just being very honest, which I think is hard to accept. But realizing like how many friends she has when she gets all of these invitations, or realizes she has all of these invitations under a doormat. Obviously people really love her, so I think there is an endearing quality about her we just don't see because we're only in her very private thoughts, which I was like, oh, interesting. What would this character be like if we were hearing about her from the perspective of her friends and Darcy and Daniel? Like, what would she look like that way? Versus like in the film, it's her story, but you're seeing it through the lens of an omniscient narrator versus directly through her lens. So that helped me like let go a lot.
That's a great point, because in this reread and the rewatch, I hated everyone. There was no redeeming qualities about anybody. Everyone's a total asshole, and they're either misogynist or racist or sizist or ageist or like, and so that's a great perspective on it. And then Skye always points out that it's satire, and I'm like, fine, but
yeah.
And so I'm gonna super smoothly segue into the question that you alluded to, and obviously the part where I say I am super smoothly transitioning to that question is the smooth part, in case you didn't catch it the first time. So
we do segues.
We do segues very poorly. So the question is Bridget an unreliable narrator? Do we trust her as we read her innermost thoughts? And this is where I think of the movie, where at the very end she says, it's just a dumb diary. These are just my dumb thoughts. Because I have my diaries from when I was 18, and them are some dumb thoughts.
Yep.
Dear diary, I had a good day today. I ate French fries. No one cares.
I mean, it's just one of those things, rereading particularly the volatile years, like 18, 22, like times when like your frontal lobe is fully forming, and when your your hormonal balance settles into a better balance, right? Like reading through those, everything for me, this will be a giant surprise to everyone, it was so dramatic. It was so over the top. And it like everything was, I will never survive this. And now I'm like, yeah, everything is survivable. So former Skye, definitely unreliable narrator, far too dramatic.
Yeah, I think she's unreliable in that, again, it's only from her perspective. So, the way she views a situation is going to be completely different than either what actually happened or the way somebody else viewed it. That also being said, like, I think for her, it's very real. For me, what I just could not get over was like how, her mom, the whole thing with her mom, the fact that people were like so blown away and so surprised, like I was like, surely there must have been some signs that her mom was gonna like fucking go off the deep end and become a common criminal. Like what? There were moments that were like these twists that I was like, no one saw this coming. Like how? But yeah, I absolutely think she's kind of an unreliable narrator, but in the way that we all are, right? Like we're telling the story from our point of view, from our perspective, and you're gonna miss stuff. And I think in some ways she wants to paint herself as kind of saintly, but she also will even call it out. So it is sort of satirical in that way, where she's like, oh, I only had 3 cigarettes, such a saint. And I'm like, oh dear.
Yeah, I think if you're coming for the facts, unreliable. But if you're coming to like see the experience of a middle-class white woman who was raised by a narcissistic mother and is insanely insecure and feels the crushing pressure of society, then I think it was actually a pretty accurate representation of what it's like to exist in that space.
Yeah, I mean, Bridget... Go ahead.
I was just going to say the ping-ponging of emotions, where one day she's like, I've been so good. I'm doing great. Everything is wonderful. And then the next day she's like, I saw Daniel in the elevator. Life is garbage. Like there were moments where I was like, oh, Jesus. And I was like, I do that all the time. But again, it's internally. So what is she like to other people? She's probably a little bit more even kiltered, but that part I was laughing every time that happened, where she'd like ping pong back and forth so dramatically. I was like, oh yeah, I know this a little too well.
I consider this book to be a mirror against every single insecurity a woman has ever had. So like Bridget runs the gamut of all of these insecurities that women typically have, which I mean plays into the whole article about being a single 30 something. And because of that heightened elevation of she drinks too much, she smokes too much, she is concerned about her weight and her diet, and what about her job, and like all of the juggling, that just made it unreal for me. So yes, agree, unreliable.
Very nice. So this book, in case it wasn't self-evident, is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, and current literature loves a retelling. In fact, retellings of Pride and Prejudice are in like the, I want to say, hundreds at this point, and we've read quite a few of them. So the premise of both Pride and Prejudice and Bridget Jones's Diary is get a man, right? Like that's the ultimate goal. If you really pare it down. How do you feel about the fact that 2 centuries separate Pride and Prejudice in this book? They're both in England. They both address white women, but get a man is still the only thing that women care about? Question mark. How do you how does that make you feel?
Not just any man. Get Colin Firth.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I agree. We should all aim for Colin Firth, really.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell I love Colin Firth.
And I mean, there is something about like Colin Firth playing Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice, and then Colin Firth being Mr. Darcy in this. Like, we can go to the Peony for that part. We're gonna get into that. But like, just the fact that should we not have changed our needs in 2 centuries? Should this no longer be the only thing that we're thinking about? And to clarify, it is not the thing that I'm thinking about, but that is the point of the book.
Strap in, here comes my TED Talk on the patriarchy.
Yeah!
If the patriarchy hasn't changed in 200 years. The society has not changed in 200 years. Yeah, let's give women the vote. Okay, now they can wear pants and ride bicycles. But still, we're going to make them highly susceptible to advertisements about their appearance that distract them from using their brains. So,
yeah,
when the core of society hasn't changed.
Yeah. I saw a really wonderful tweet a series of tweets the other day, where some guy on Twitter opened his mouth and essentially was like, women are so picky nowadays. Like, why do they never want to settle down? Blah, blah, blah. And another guy was like, because men aren't shit. Like, and essentially it was just like, look, like historically women could not be single. Like, because it was literally life or death, right? Like they weren't allowed access to higher education. They weren't allowed access to jobs. You couldn't own your own property. You couldn't vote. So the only way you could survive was to marry a man. Do you really think that they were marrying the love of their lives? No, they were probably marrying trash, like absolute garbage. If you got lucky, you married an old guy who died soon and then left you with all of his money, if you were lucky. But now like women can go into the workforce. They have their own businesses. They have their own property. And I think Sharon in the book kind of starts to talk about this of like, as the future progresses, women will probably be single longer and longer, and marriage will decline because women are afforded more freedom. So why are they going to settle for somebody when they can just be on their own and be happy and fulfilled solo? Or if they find a partner who like truly is a partner, then they can be married, and it becomes more about a choice versus a necessity. And I think like what you're saying, it's only in kind of recent years where we've been given more of those freedoms. Like women haven't had the right to vote for very long. It's still shocking when a woman is a doctor to some people, like wild. But I think that's such a big part of it, is we haven't had those freedoms until fairly recently. which is depressing.
I mean, I also want to point out that you brought up a tweet, which means that this conversation we're having is 20 years after Helen Fielding was like, let's not marry people because they're shit. Let's marry them because that is something that we want to do, not something we're forced to do. 20 years later, still the same conversation. Nothing has changed.
Yeah. Well, I think that with those new opportunities, like to echo it, it hasn't changed. But now, in addition to the expectation of you should be a wife and a mother, there's this added expectation of you should be everything and you should do it perfectly and you should not have a hair out of place the entire time. And it's like, go fuck yourself. Like, men are allowed to age. Men are like, no one says like men age gracefully because they're just allowed to get fat and lose their hair and they're fine. And it's like, no. Women have to stay a size 4 and they have to dye their hair and they have to have the baby on the hip and the Chanel suit and be a CEO. And it's like, that's just literally not how human beings work.
To take us down an intersectional moment, a recent comment I saw on social media was about the fact that the way to dismantle the people who will dismantle the patriarchy aren't women. It's non-binary folk and trans folk, because they literally disrupt, like, it is literally a complete negation of the binary system. And goodbye, binary system, you are no longer valid. And I love everything about that. And I support it wholeheartedly. I'm here for someone to dismantle the bits that I belong to partially.
Yeah. Well, and to challenge, like, what is femininity? What is masculinity? Why can't those two things coexist? They should, or just remove them completely and just let people be. Like, just vibe, man.
That's a t-shirt right there. That's a t-shirt. Just vibe. Yeah. So Fielding makes fun of all of these self-help books and all of the diets. And I love that at one point Bridget starts mixing her diets and she's like, I think this is on this diet, but this is on that diet. But I don't understand why I'm not losing any weight. It is meant to be ironic, right? It's meant to be satire. It's meant to shine a light at the ridiculousness that is thrust upon women in the expectations of what size they should be, what they should and should not eat, what they should and should not wear. The conversation with Natasha when she's like, oh, I recognize the hem of that dress. It's last season. Like, I was like, the reply to that is, it's vintage, but whatever. But so my question really is, after all these years, because we do still have all these diets, I feel like the age of self-help books has declined. Do you think the irony comes through? Do you think that, like, because she mentioned one of the diets and I was like, oh, I don't even remember the name of this diet, let alone what it meant. But I bet if we read this 20 years ago, we'd be like, oh yeah, this is the diet where, like, you count the grains or whatever. But do you think that it still comes through the irony and the joke, like the pointing out of the ridiculousness of what's happening?
I think it does, because her weight fluctuates between 119 and 140. She is a small person. She's a tiny person. And in our current modern society, women are embracing their size and every shape is beautiful. And in comparison to all of that, she's still a tiny person. I'm speaking as a tiny person. I'm like, you care that you're one? We're kind of the same size. I think it comes through in that way. And also, I remember my family going on the Atkins diet and their hair falling out because it's terrible for you. So yes, anybody who's done a diet or seen a diet harm someone hopefully sees the irony.
Yeah. And there was a part in the book where so you see her listing her calories, right? And it sometimes it's in the 4,000s and whatever. But then she's talking to her friends and she's like, oh yeah, you need to do 1,500 to stay. And but I try to do 1,000 because I'm on this diet. And then one of her friends, I don't remember, I think it was maybe Tom, was like, don't you need more than that just to be alive? And she's like, I had I had been so focused on my weight and what my appearance that I forgot that survival, like food as fuel, was even an option. And I was like, that's the point. That's the point.
Yeah, I think for me it was another thing where because it is in the film as well, a little bit of that satire, like, but I think it's I don't even know if I would really call it satire, but you have that moment where you watch her clear off her bookshelf of all of the like how to get a man, and instead she replaces it with like how to find self-worth, how to learn to love yourself, and it becomes about her, which isn't really in the book, but I had to remind myself like, oh, this is satire in this moment. There was a part where she was like, oh, for breakfast had toast and half of a grapefruit, but replaced half of grapefruit with Mars bar. And I was like, what? And I lost it. I laughed so hard. And I was like, yeah, like when you're trying to bottle yourself in, you wind up finding like you make like little excuses for yourself because you're just like, I don't want to do that. That sounds dumb. Yeah, I think the satire comes through, but I again had to remind myself to not think of the film, and then it clicked a lot more. But
and there's that whole month where she just had smoothies, which felt like the most LA thing.
Yeah. She had like 32 smoothies in a day. I was like, girl, you're gonna die. Like, stop.
It's gonna like, it will not be pretty. It will not be pretty on the way back out.
Oh Lord.
Same
and then she's like, why am I not losing weight? Hate pureed food.
Sugar alone.
Yeah.
Right. All right. I feel like this is a good moment for us to take a break and to take a drinking situation. All right. We'll see you in a sec.
Okay. We're going to take an intermission right here. When we come back, we're going to break down our favorite moment from the book.
And discuss our ratings and if this book made us want to get naked.
Please enjoy this message from one of our friends in the podcasting world.
I'm good.
It's totally fine. We're back and we're good to come back. That's brilliant. All right, we are back from our break and we are talking about Bridget Jones's Diary by Helen Fielding. We're going to talk about our favorite or most compelling moments in this book in case there were no favorite moments, which I feel like might be the case for some of us. I'm just anticipating this conversation. All right, so what was your favorite or most compelling moment in the book? And for me, and this is book/movie combo pack, but I love this moment in both. The blue soup marmalade dinner party is extremely relatable. I hosted a dinner party yesterday and I started making something and went, one of the main ingredients in this is garlic and I have 0 garlic in my house. I have to turn off everything and go to the store right this second because that's where we're at in my head. So I find that dinner party so relatable where like in your head, you're like, I'm going to be brilliant at this. And then you attempt it and you're like, I am complete shit at this.
That's something that I think I related to in the reread because as a young person, I didn't cook. But now that I've done a lot of cooking, I'm like, oh no, she's getting too fancy with a frise. No, stop.
Bit overboard.
Yeah.
I really love the moment. It was more of like a cute moment where I think she's at the she's at Darcy's parents' Ruby anniversary wedding thing, and I think it's like it's the moment where Natasha comes up and like makes a dig at her, like, oh, where's your bunny suit? I believe it's this moment. And whenever Bridget sort of defends herself and makes a joke, whether it's at her own expense or not, but like she can make the joke before other people do, and she makes Darcy laugh, and he like those moments where, and this is me being like too sappy and romantic, I guess, but those moments where you can see Darcy is like very attracted to her because she's just being herself. And I love like those little quiet moments, which I was expecting there to be more of in this book. That's fine, but it's whatever. So I think those really cute moments were some of my favorites. And then for whatever reason, I love the whole bit with Tom and his like secret nose job. Like everybody being like, "Is he dead?" And he's just like, "No, I just got a nose job. I didn't want anybody to know. I'm really embarrassed." So silly.
Yeah, I think for me, there was so much like I was saying, like I was recalling my own insecurity when I was, coming of age in a city and dating and trying to figure out my career. And so the moments that I think were like hyperbolically dramatic were the moments that I love the most, like the nose job and like the ending, like Julio just bursting into the house through the French doors, just being like, "You are sleeping with my woman." And then they go upstairs and they have sex. And it's like, what is happening? And it's like, "Mom, Una thinks the gravy needs sieving." And then she like comes down with her top backwards. And I'm just like, they saved this until the end? Like I wanted this action like throughout. So that moment I was like, yes. And I mean, I understand as a production choice why it didn't make it into the film, but I kind of wish it did. I'm happy we at least got one fight scene in the film.
Mm-hmm.
We are putting the biggest pin in that film fight scene because
we are.
So many feelings.
Yeah, we are. Oh yeah.
This book for me taught me how to introduce people, and I still do this to this day. This is Skye. I've known her for 10 years, and she's a fantastic black lady. And this is so and so, and I don't, and like I still do that, and
introduce people with thoughtful detail.
Thoughtful details.
Helps other people remember them.
Yeah.
Stirs up conversation. That
has spanned the 20 years between readings, as I guess it has to be memorable because it's integrated into my life.
Yes, I agree that I have kept that as well. And I'm terrible at parties. And so I rely heavily on this particular advice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what is everyone's hot take of this book? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was fine? Would you recommend?
So for me, it still held up. I was expecting to reread and be like, nope, goodbye, not okay. There are some moments that I don't think aged well, particularly racist comments that could really stand to not exist really ever, but also not in a book currently. But overall, it did hold up for me. I did spend a lot of time yelling, "Listen to Sharon," very loudly at the book. Listen to Sharon. She is the future. So it still holds up. I would still recommend it. I might just say, if you're not a big reader, watch the movie. It's close enough.
Yeah. I was the first half, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this, and then again I got over this isn't the film, this is a book, it's a different format, it's her internal thoughts, her journal, and then also one of the things that I really loved about the book versus the film was that she walks away from Daniel and is kind of, and like there's not that back and forth push and pull like you have in the film, which I actually really loved. I love that you still have her like thinking about him and being upset about it, but it's not it's not, I didn't find myself being like, he's clearly the worst person like after the breakup. There were moments where before they broke up where I was like, Bridget, this is clearly red flag city. Like, what?
Get out of there, girl.
Yeah, but I was like, okay, but this is relatable. Like, I've been in that situation. I know people who've been in that situation. So I think if you're going to read it, keep in mind that it is a satire. It is from the mid-90s, and that it is not like the film. And I think if you can get those reminders in, you'll really enjoy it. Like in hindsight, I actually really like this book quite a lot. So I would recommend it.
I
went through the
hated it.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
reread. Oh, no, okay. I hated it. My reread. I would probably not recommend reading it ever again. It does not age well. I mean, giving some people some caveats, some of these interesting tidbits we've put out there makes it more enjoyable. But nah, I had to 2-star this reread. Which is basically like me a scathing review from me.
That's true. That part is true.
How about you,
fuck
Julia?
This book. Fuck this book. I'll leave it at that. I went through the same roller coaster of emotions that Lex went through of like, first, I didn't know it was a satire, and then it clicked for me. And then I had to disassociate all of the characters in the film from the characters in the book. Mm-hmm. But then again, like, it just didn't, like, it was, I think because it was so insular, it was so in her mind, and it gave such a like specific perspective. And the fact that it was very triggering of a place in my life that I am thankfully no longer in and I've worked through. I think I was just like, this is not the perspective that I currently want to be engaging in. Of all of the books that are out there in the world, I want to be reading stories and narratives of people with different perspectives, different lives. I want to know what other cultures are out there, what other experiences are out there. And so like to just be triggered into like my teenage self, I was like, no, I've been there, done that. Like, no, thank you.
I will say,
excellently put.
Yeah, having heard that, I will say that I have a book recommendation that I feel like does similar things to Bridget Jones's Diary, but is by miles a better book. And It's Been a Pleasure, Nani Blake.
Yes!
It's Been a Pleasure, Nani Blake is phenomenal. And it isn't one woman's exploration of like moving on and being mid-30s and single and trying to love herself in her own body without reading too many Vogues. But like, it does similar things, but the discoveries and the conversations and the loveliness. Also, we did an episode on this book. Go listen to that and just hear me gush for 45 minutes about it. But It's Been a Pleasure, Nani Blake is so, so, so good. And I feel like it is the new, it is the current Bridget. It's way better. Yes. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I
need
just
to check
wrote
that
it
out.
down. I was like, let me put a pin in that. Yeah, listening to you guys say, I think I went through a roller coaster of like how I felt about this book. There were moments where I was like, fuck this. I don't want to read this anymore. And then there were moments where I was like, just keep going.
Well, thank you for finishing it for our purposes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad I did. It's so chaotic. There's so much chaos in this book.
It's definitely a time capsule story, I think, now.
Mm-hmm.
Does not age.
Well, so the last thing that sorry, you do it.
Yeah. No. Okay, I'll do it. So the last thing that we do is discuss if this book got us horny, if it made us want to get naked. And for me, no, because I was filled with rage. I was filled with blind rage most of the time. All of the sex scenes in this book are closed door behind. It's implied. Great times, good times. So I need very explicit sexual acts. So not for me. And by the way, you do not have to answer this if you're not comfortable answering this. Just a little segment we do.
Yes. It did not. No. The answer for me is no. And in the book, Bridget has a paragraph where she says, like, we would not want to know what goes on behind closed doors once Darcy and Elizabeth get together in Pride and Prejudice. And so we don't get to know what happens. And I
disagree.
That is not why I read romance. Like, bring me all the naked bits, and it did not bring me any naked bits, and that was a misstep. I would have enjoyed more information there. So no, it did not make me want to get naked.
It did not make me want to get naked. It just made me want to go back and rewatch Pride and Prejudice with young Colin Firth. And then that would make me want to get naked.
Yes. Yes,
all
like that.
I just kept thinking about young Colin Firth and I was like, damn it. So the book had nothing to do with that, I think.
Yeah, it also that specifically filled me with rage because it's like anyone who's ever read a romance novel, when you open it, you like there are some that you open, you start reading and you get that slow burn and you're like, okay, it's about to happen. Okay, they're in the room. Okay, oh, he slips my bra strap down. And then it cuts to the next chapter and it's like the sun streamed into the window and I was like, go fuck yourself so hard. And I felt like this book gave that to me, that same sensation, because I was like, surely she's going through all of this internal existential just insecurity and dread and beating herself up, and we're gonna get a little something special. We're gonna get like a little bit of like an upswing. And we get a paragraph where she's like, ooh, the things he did to me. Wow. And I'm like, tell them to me.
Yeah.
So no, I wanted to get naked, but it disappointed me severely.
She wrote it like screenplay sex. It was screenplay sex, right?
Yeah.
You know, fade to black, cut, tangled up in sheets the next day.
Fucking rude.
Fucking rude.
Well, on that note, so on that note, we're gonna put a pin in it until we go over to the Peony and talk about the movie part of it. And I do, as a tiny preview, I do like the movie in a way that I don't like the book. So I feel like it's gonna be a whole lot less go fuck yourself and slightly more maybe make different choices and this or that, but like not altogether the worst. Is my short hot take.
Yeah.
Peony, thank you for being here. Lex, Julia, thank you for coming to Booklandia. We are so excited to come smell the peony and thank you.
Yeah. This was such a pleasure. This was so fun.
This is great.
Yay. So are you, dear audience human, gonna pick up this book now that you've heard our review? Let us know in the comments. Have a suggestion for another review? Slide on into our DMs.
If you like this adventure in books or updates on our upcoming projects, please follow, like, save, subscribe, rate, review us on Instagram at l.skyford, on Twitch at lskyford, and on Twitter at skyfordl. Phew. I'm Sky.
And I'm Ford. That's it for this episode. We will see you next time on Booklandia, where every book is a whole world to explore. And we're out.